In early April of 1241, the entirety of Central Europe was trapped in a bitter, muddy, thawing spring. On the morning of April 9th, Duke Henry the Pious mobilized the elite chivalry of Poland and Bavaria. Looking closely at the dense chainmail and heavy iron helmets of his forces, we see an army built entirely for crushing, static defense. 2 days later, and 500 miles to the south, King Béla IV anchored the entire royal army of Hungary behind a fortress of chained war wagons along the banks of the Sajó River. The monarchs of Christendom prepared for combat under a massive misconception. King Béla and Duke Henry operated under the assumption that they were facing two completely independent invading armies. In reality, both European armies were being drawn into halves of a single continent-spanning trap. This maneuver was orchestrated entirely by one commander riding through the Carpathian Mountains, General Subutai. By coordinating strikes across half a continent, Subutai turned isolated feudal skirmishes into a synchronized, large-scale operational machine. This map of Central Europe illustrates Subutai's strategic objective, the vast Hungarian plain. To prevent Bohemia and Germany from marching south to create overwhelming numerical superiority, Subutai divided his forces. A northern detachment invaded Poland to pin them down, while his main column punched directly into the Hungarian heartland. Executing this maneuver required tracking multiple moving armies across 500 miles of medieval wilderness. Organizing a synchronized strike without telegraphs, radios, or even line of sight was considered impossible by Western standards. The Mongol forces bypassed this limitation using a specialized relay courier network known as the Örtöö. Way stations were positioned roughly 25 miles apart across the supply lines. By keeping fresh horses and dedicated riders on constant standby, a single courier could cover up to 200 miles in a single 24-hour window. High-speed communication allowed Subutai to perfectly calibrate the movements of two separate armies. He defeated European forces by mastering time and logistics. The first phase of the trap was sprung on April 9th in the Polish pine forests, at Legnica, when Duke Henry committed his heavy cavalry to a frontal charge. Looking at this Mongol archer's equipment reveals a stark contrast. Clad in light leather and wielding dual-quivered composite recurve bows, the Mongol cavalry utilized speed and fluid range rather than static, heavy iron as the European knights advanced. The Mongols ignited fields of dry reeds. Dense billows of yellow sulfur smoke drifted rapidly across the battlefield, entirely blinding the charging heavy cavalry. With the knights disoriented, the Mongol vanguard executed a mongudai, a deliberate, feigned retreat. The knights pursued, breaking their own lines and isolating themselves from their infantry. Once separated, the European heavy cavalry was surrounded and dismantled by concentrated arrow fire. Duke Henry was killed on the field. However, the tactical victory yielded a larger operational prize. King Wenceslas of Bohemia, marching with 50,000 reinforcements just days away, received word of the slaughter, halted his advance in terror, and assumed a defensive posture. The northern threat to Subutai was completely neutralized. Within 48 hours, an Örtöö carrier reached Subutai 500 miles to the south at Mohi, confirming that his northern flank was secure. Armed with this intelligence, Subutai initiated the primary strike. He ordered Batu Khan to launch a loud, diversionary frontal assault on the main stone bridge of the Sajó River, pinning the Hungarian defenders with stone shot and incendiaries fired from Chinese traction trebuchets. This aerial view of the Sajó River landscape reveals the flooded, marshy curves of the terrain. Under the cover of darkness, Subutai led his division downstream through this exact freezing marshland, secretly constructing a pontoon bridge to cross the river completely undetected. At dawn, Subutai's forces emerged on the Hungarian flank and rear. The royal army was suddenly boxed inside their own heavily fortified, tightly packed wagon camp. This schematic reveals Subutai's psychological strategy. To avoid a desperate fight to the death, he intentionally left a visible gap in his encirclement pointing west. As the Hungarian line broke and soldiers poured into this gap, they entered a 30-mile kill zone, systematically slaughtered by parallel riding Mongol horsemen. King Béla's royal army fell apart internally. the military elite of Hungary was erased because their enemy engineered a psychological escape hatch and weaponized their panic. In the span of 48 hours, Subutai dismantled the fighting strength of two distinct European coalitions across a 500-mile front. The Hungarian plains were completely secured. With the royal armies shattered, the path to Vienna, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Atlantic coast lay entirely exposed and defenseless. The salvation of Western Europe arrived in a message from 4,000 miles away. In the distant political center of Karakorum, Great Khan Ogedei had died. Mongol imperial law strictly dictated that all royal princes must return home to elect a successor upon the death of the Khan. Batu Khan was forced to turn back, and Subutai ordered an immediate withdrawal from the continent. The ruined armies and Legnica and Mohi proved that heavy armor and static fortresses could not compete with superior intelligence, strict discipline, and high-speed coordination. Subutai orchestrated an operational theater of war on a scale that Western Europe would not experience again until the campaigns of Napoleon.